Welcome to Superchargers. I'm Daniel Thomas. Let's go. G'day, guys. When it comes to stress relief, my guest on this episode has awesome tools and techniques he has learned and experienced firsthand. Professor Pete Alexander is an author and speaker who inspires business leaders to better protect their health and handle challenging situations with grace and success. In fact, Pete has dedicated his professional career to helping others navigate stress. Here's my conversation with Professor Pete Alexander. I really enjoyed your TED Talk. I watched your TED
Thank you.
Talk. We'll get into that a bit, but to take it back, I know you had you had burnout. What did I also experienced burnout, and it sounds like my experience of burnout was a little different, but still burnout. Mine was very much around anxiety.
Mhm,
When
mhm.
when that kind of culminated for me, what did the burnout look like for you?
That's a great question. Well, what happened was, if I take it back just a little bit, um, growing up in a very dysfunctional family, I didn't learn how to deal with the stress. And so when I became an adult, working adult, all I did was anytime I was stressed, I tried to ignore it instead of addressing it. And that worked all fine and dandy until my mid 40s. And what ended up happening was I had a perfect storm of stressful activities going on. My dad was dying, and he needed his affairs to be taken care of. My mom had major surgery and didn't have the insurance for the physical therapy she was going to need. My business had several employees that needed my attention. My kids were small at that time and wanted daddy's attention. And as I mentioned earlier, I was heading for a divorce. So the lots of, the enormous amount of stuff on my shoulders. And my body was telling me that I needed to do something, and I just kept ignoring it. I remember visiting my dad in hospice, and my back locked up. I could not stand. I could not sit. I could not lie even on the hard floor and have any comfort whatsoever. And and I just kept on. It was like, okay, I just deal with it, and I did never thought that there was something else going on. Well, then in 2008, the at one point I started losing weight rapidly. And it was at first, I thought it was fantastic. Um, I hadn't lost weight since my early 20s, and I was like I said, in my mid 40s. And what ended up happening was, I looked at it and I thought, okay, I'm eating my normal foods. I'm, having some junk food like I would do because when you're stressed, we tend to eat, the fast food, the junk food because we crave carbs when we're stressed. And so I was eating that. I wasn't doing any special exercise, just my normal exercise, and the weight kept on coming off. And after the 30th pound came off, I thought, oh boy, I better have this checked out. And this 30th pound came off in less than 30 days.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it was a rapid weight loss. So I had blood work done, and the doctor came back and said, you have stress induced diabetes. And I thought, well, what's that? And he said, well, technically, calling it stress induced diabetes is not accurate because if we look at the diseases that are caused by stress, there's a intermediary step, and that's cellular inflammation. So when we are overly stressed, and when we're stressed, we're dumping cortisol, adrenaline into our bodies constantly. That causes cellular inflammation. And that cellular inflammation is what causes chronic disease. In my case, it was diabetes, even though I only have one cousin who had diabetes. No one else in my family. No record of it. And others sadly get heart disease, cancer. So it's something to really look carefully at. However, because I was such a type A personality who go, 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 when I was first diagnosed with the stress-induced diabetes, I said, okay, fine, just give me the drugs, whatever I need. I don't have time for this. So, they gave me the insulin. I got on an insulin pump, and I continued to burn the candle at both ends for another 10 years. And in 2018, I ended up in the emergency room, 1 hour from being comatose, and an extended stay in ICU with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for the listeners who may not know what that is, basically my body was eating itself alive because of my stress. And that's what burnout looked like for me. And the crazy, absolute crazy thing about that is so I had gone back to corporate a few years previously. And because one of my ex bosses had asked me, hey, can you come aboard here? And so I was still trying to manage the other business remotely as well. And my ex boss had left, and I had a micro manager for a supervisor. And I was in my mid 50s at that point and thinking, why do I have a micromanager? And so on my second day in ICU, I get this text, roughly 6 a.m. And from my micromanager says, you have a webinar you need to run at 8 o'clock. What are you going to do about it? Now, in the intensive care unit, what a surprise. I did not have my laptop with me. I just had my phone. So there I was trying to reschedule this webinar, pushing the envelope of this phone. And the nurse who was on staff at that point, they were checking my blood sugars every half an hour. So you don't sleep in ICU. You just don't, because they're poking and prodding you. And my blood sugars, when I was admitted to the ICU or emergency and then ICU, the blood sugars were so high that the medical grade glucometers that the hospital had could not get a reading. It just said high. So the lab had to manually uh, estimate what my blood sugars were, which were 8 to 10 times higher than normal. After a couple of days, my numbers had come back down into more reasonable numbers. Still high, but not as bad as it was. And as soon as I started sitting there trying to reschedule the webinar, like a 90-degree angle, my blood sugars skyrocketed straight back up. And this nurse, who, pretty much a complete stranger, she says to me, you realize this is what put you in the hospital bed in the first place. And that was my epiphany moment. I realized at that point that I was trading my health for my career. And that's a really bad trade. And so the next couple of days that I was in the hospital, I just really contemplated what I was doing. And I realized that I can't do this any longer because I'm not going to live this long. So after I got out of the hospital, I resigned from that position. In fact, I resigned not from my micromanager, but from my micromanager's boss, who was another person I had worked with at a different company. And so we had a great relationship, and, let that person know why I was leaving. And then I just focused on my health for the first time in my career. I really did. And I tried a whole bunch of different stress relief tools and techniques. Many of them worked, some of them didn't. And what I noticed was that not only did my stress go down, my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down and my energy level went way, way up. It was like I had found a fountain of youth. And Daniel, the crazy thing is, you see me what I look like right now. Other than a little bit more gray hair, I look younger today than I did in 2008 when I was first diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes. That's what stress does to us. It rapidly ages us.
Absolutely. It's yeah, there's a lot there. I find it fascinating when when somebody sort of devalues your health crisis and they still want you to just get on with the job. I think that speaks
Mm-hmm.
volumes of what what a workplace or an employer thinks of you if they just disregard the fact that you're in ICU. Like it can't get much more of an emergency state than that, but they still want their goddamn presentation. I think
Yeah.
that just speaks volumes. But it's just it's amazing how the body just gives us these signals, but our kind of mindset, or what we have the ability within us to kind of stubbornly push against what the body's telling us. In your case, you said you went on for another 10 years
Mm-hmm.
until the body really but it's just so fascinating that the charts there were literally skyrocketing as relative to the charts were speaking volumes about what was going on. It's just like that's the proof right there. It's really crazy. I had a similar experience in that my body started to just tell me, if you're not going to stop, I'm going to kind of intervene until you start taking a hard look at your lifestyle and making some changes. Because if certain things hadn't intervened on a kind of physical level, um, it's amazing that the body does that. And the fact that you're looking and feeling younger, it's just I just think when we're aligned with the more holistic parts of ourselves, it reflects our entire being without sounding too philosophical.
I, I'm curious, what signals were your body
Yeah, so I
giving
I
you?
I was to cut it short, I was not dealing with a whole heap of things, but at the same time, I was keeping myself extraordinarily busy, just like yourself in
Mm-hmm.
a way. But on top of a high pressure job in architecture, I was doing shows in a band. I was still
Mm-hmm.
studying, and I was being
Mm-hmm.
extremely excessive on. I was kind of self medicating on weekends with alcohol. So my body
Mm-hmm.
was not only was my body depleted, but I wasn't facing up to a lot of unresolved issues that I needed to address. So similar to you, it all came to a head at the one time. You were saying you had a number of problems going on. It was the same. Everything culminated at once. And I'd always been very popular and had a career on track. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was having crippling anxiety. So I just started having panic attacks and didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know how I was going to face, and I hadn't called in sick for years. Like I was just somebody who, no matter what, I never called in sick. I never took a day for myself. And all of a sudden I was like, just taken out by anxiety. So I had to start it really addressing things from there. But similar to yourself, as soon as I started to turn things around, eventually I did like I felt younger and I looked younger. And so even though I'd really been through it, it was a similar kind of call it physical manifestation once things were back on once I was looking after myself. But that took a
Mm-hmm.
long time. But yeah, I've never heard of diabetes being stress induced. But like you said, when it's the cells, that's the triggering thing, that right. So that makes
Yeah, and
sense.
it does. And for each person, it'll be potentially different. For me, I guess my pancreas was the weakest link in my body's chain. You know, our bodies will continue to ramp up our warning signals. So, it could start with stiffness in our back and shoulders. And, for a lot of people who work at a desk, this is very common. And what you might not realize is that when we're stressed, we tend to hunch over at our desks. And that's what causes that back and shoulder stiffness. It could be sleep disorder where we're either not getting enough sleep or too much sleep. It could be things like stomach issues where no amount of Bismol will help us with that, or reaching for the aspirins every day or every other day because we've constantly got headaches. And the weight fluctuations, for me, it was losing weight very rapidly. Others, it might gain weight rapidly. All these triggers are ones that our body is saying, look, you're stressed. You need to take care of yourself. And if we continue to ignore it, we give our bodies no choice but to continue to ramp it up until, in my case, I ended up with a chronic disease that I have to deal with for the rest of my life. Had I addressed it sooner and took it seriously, maybe I wouldn't have had diabetes. And so that's why I try and get the word out, because while someone still has their health, don't take it for granted. And it's interesting. I've had people who say, well, health isn't that big of a deal. And I said, really? So imagine the last time that you had a really bad flu, let's say. And if you think back, and if it was a really bad flu, did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed? Chances are you didn't, if you're honest. And when all we have the energy to do is lie in bed, we're no good to our careers. We're no good to our businesses. We're no good to our loved ones. So health is paramount. Health and time, to me, are our two greatest assets, and we should not take them lightly. The other thing that I wanted to just mention, you were talking about the anxiety is what had you reach burnout. And that's interesting because when I was writing my book, I found that there's basically two types of stress that we really have to be concerned about, because not all stress is bad. In fact, there is good stress. It's called eustress, EUSTRESS. And that's when we're working on something, a project that we're excited about. We have some passion about it. And that kind of stress is good because we need to, let's say, have a deadline. We need to reach a deadline for something. That kind of stress is not going to cause any issues for us. But the two flavors of stress that we have to be careful about, one is that anxiety that you mentioned. And frequently, and I'm not sure if this was your case as well, but in most cases, it's worrying about something that may or may not happen in the future. And the problem is, as humans, when we worry about something, we're thinking about the negative aspects of that. So let's say we're worrying about a difficult conversation that we need to have with someone. And all we're thinking about is, oh, this conversation is going to go awful. And what usually happens is when we continuously think about that, we manifest that outcome. It just, but what I always recommend when it comes to anxiety, a good, easy trick to do is to visualize 5 seconds after that event. And so let's say it's a difficult conversation. So 5 seconds after the last word has been spoken in that conversation, you imagine the other person smiling. Maybe you're giving that other person a hug, shaking their hand, whatever it is that would be appropriate at that moment. And if you imagine that, you'll notice that your stress starts coming down instead of worrying about the negative outcome. And in most cases, you'll have a better outcome regardless, because you're putting that kind of positive energy to it. The other flavor of negative stress is ruminating about something in the past. And this usually happens with guilt. So we're either feel guilty about something we either did or didn't do in the past. And the reality is, first of all, it's in the past. We cannot change it. We can take the positive learnings from it. But if we can forgive ourselves about whatever it was that we did or didn't do and let it go, then we're able to move on. So if we can minimize our ruminating about the past and anxiety about the future and live more in the present, we're going to be able to deal with any other stress much more effectively.
Those reframes there are pretty cool. I like that you touched on this passionate stress because that's the thing, right? I think if you're excited about what you're doing, that's a different kind of impact on the body. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're fueling along to get something that's that you're doing for the right reason or that you're passionate about. It's important, I think, to mention that's like call it a good stress. But
Mm-hmm.
I love these reframes you offer, and I know you do it in the TED talk as well in terms of rejection.
Yeah.
But yeah, this reframe of yeah, why don't you counter that uh, kind of negative talk with a different outcome, and that in turn may relieve some of the anxiety or stress about, like you say, a difficult conversation. These things you're suggesting, they pull the weight out of it. They lighten it
Mm-hmm.
up. Um, Another factor that I struggled as well that you mentioned in the talk too is toxic perfectionism. Perfectionism. When you're that hard on yourself, that was an issue with me, was how hard I was on myself with stuff. And you talked about it as well in terms of never feeling satisfied because you're in this
Mm-hmm.
constant kind of perfectionist. So you're chasing this kind of unattainable thing, and you might struggle to feel those sense of achievements because of this relentless self-critic or relentless perfectionism. So what's your counter to the perfectionism type stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's several things you can do, but the first one that comes to my mind is, especially if we're a perfectionist who is a type A personality, right?
Hmm.
So,
Like
because those
yourself,
usually,
yeah.
yeah, they go hand in hand, is realize that you can't do everything, that something isn't going to be perfect, and be okay with that. The problem with perfectionism is it's often a result of trying to do more to prove yourself to someone else. And that's a real that's problematic for anyone who tries to be perfect, wants to get the approval of someone else, whether it's a parent, whether it's a boss, whether it's a spouse. The only person that really matters in making sure that you feel good about yourself is yourself. And so you have to think about, all right, if you have this perfectionist mentality, realize that don't try and get everything perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Really just reframe what is most important to you, and the stuff that is not top level. Then what ends up happening is you can let those go, or not prioritize those. One of the things that also is very important if you're a perfectionist is to make sure that your personal values, you're very clear on what your personal values are, and you understand what your top personal values are. Let's say your top five. Because if we know what our top five values are, truly do, and I mean, in my book, and I can include a link to a video I did on personal values. It's a very simple process, takes 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the most, but it's a game changer activity, because when you know very clearly what your, let's say, top five values are, those are your non-negotiables. Those are, if you know what those clearly are, and you are working on a particular, you're at a job, you're at your business, any kind of decision that's important that you need to make, if you run it by those top values, if one of those values is not in alignment with that decision, guaranteed you're adding additional stress to your life. And as a perfectionist, if one of our top values is not in alignment and we're going and we're doing it anyway, inevitably there's going to be a problem, and we're just going to let it beat ourselves up so much. So it's very, very important. If you're a perfectionist, know what your values are and stick to those values, because that's your North Star.
The core values are so important. It comes up a bit on the show, but defining those, and again, when I defined them personally, and then I realized that, like you say, any decisions or things I was doing in the past that weren't aligned with those, it just repeatedly never ended well. And
Mm-hmm.
then once I got very clear about those values, um, yeah, there's just a kind of more of a lightness to it. Like, but I just it just repeatedly never kind of worked out until I got to a point where I was like, dude, you gotta like define those values, and like you say, the overarching thing. So yeah, it's great that you're emphasizing that in terms of stress relief too, because it's like, where is the stress coming from? Well, core values are out of line. So
Mm-hmm.
you're fighting something, or you're justifying something to yourself as being okay, when actually at your core, you know, it's going against like your your values. And that's all stress. It's all
It
cumulative
is.
stress.
It is. And when we're not, our values are not in alignment with that decision, we're not being true to ourselves. So we just it's a horrible cycle to be in. It really is. And from a prioritization standpoint, when you know what your values are, you know exactly what you need to do. And anything that doesn't fit, well, guess what? It either gets delegated or it's low priority.
Helps with the decision making, and in turn alleviates more stress of decision making. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um now, laughter is important to you. It's important to us all.
Yep.
Um, and you have offered it as a great counter to rejection.
Hmm.
I've experienced a lot of rejection, as we all have, and I think it's very commendable that you tried 96 times, that you were so persistent, or whatever the number was with the TEDx talk.
Yeah.
So I might have
89
eight.
before the
Sorry.
90th. Before the 90th one finally
Yeah, but
got approved.
that's very like commendable. Like I just got into like a union thing here, but they rejected me multiple times. And I was sort of like, most people at this stage would just turn around and walk, but I was like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to give up on these guys, and they've just accepted me in it. But it's just a similar concept in terms of the not giving up. But I love the way that you've offered a a light-hearted laughter approach to those moments, because we all get rejected any number of times in a week or a day.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so
It's true.
so how did you find laughter as being like, how did you become aware of laughter as being such a cool counter to this?
Well, it's interesting. So I actually discovered laughter yoga back when I was still living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I just happened to be walking by this park in the city, and there were people that were just laughing. And at first I thought, are these people, have they lost their mind? What's going on? And then they just invited me to participate. And so I learned a little bit more and found out that laughter yoga started in 1995 by a Dr. Maiden Kataria, and has clubs all over the world. There's because it's lot of it's a volunteer organization. There, it's 100, 200,000 clubs throughout the world. But what was interesting is, as I was laughing and learning the techniques and getting certified as a laughter yoga teacher, I started applying after that certification. I started applying to TEDx talks, and I wasn't thinking about doing laugh as a topic. I was doing other topics related to stress, and my first 50 or so applications, and I had three different topics that I was, using depending on what the theme of the TEDx was. And I got several interviews, but continued to get rejected. And similar to what you were talking about earlier about coming to a point, do you want to quit or not? And it was roughly at my 50th rejection. And I thought to myself, do I really want to put up with this anymore? And I realized, well, wait a minute. What if I changed my topic and talked about rejection and talked about rejection to start with from TEDx organizers? And I thought, okay, so that's a different spin. And I realized too that each time that I would get rejected with that topic, it was actually okay. And the reason it was okay was they were giving me
More,
additional data,
more
more
food.
data, exactly, more data for my talk. But then also, because of that attitude, I started laughing it off. So I would literally, when I would get a rejection, or they would ghost you, they don't reply. So it's a rejection as well. I would just say, thank you. And that's exactly it. I would laugh it off. And it made a complete difference to me because the one of the topics that I had used prior was my what I learned growing up in an extremely dysfunctional family. And when I would get rejected with that one in particular, it was as if it was a gut punch, and it hurt. And so every time I got rejected from that, I just thought to myself, oh, I don't, I was taking it personally. But having the complete different attitude, it made all the difference in the world. And, and I actually enjoyed the application process after that. And I just said, you know what? I'll just continue adding to my data until it comes through. And what was funny is that when I finally got approved, at first I had to look at it twice, like I'm thinking, okay, is somebody pulling a joke on me? Is this it's sort of like when I got my when I was approved for my PhD. I remember that this professor who was the one that would review our dissertations and stuff, he was not a friendly person whatsoever. And he sent me just this very short email saying, okay, this looks good. I'll send it for recommendation to the board. And I remember looking at this email after the previous email he sent me was just this redlined rejection telling me that, you know, maybe I should consider not doing a PhD. I mean, he did everything to make me feel stupid. And I remember reading this very short email and I'm thinking to myself, did I graduate or close to graduate? I was like, and I had to show people, I'm thinking, I think I graduate. I mean, I think I'm done with this now. It's getting approved, but I'm not sure. And that was the exact same feeling I had with that TEDx. It was like I had to show, I showed my son and I showed my wife and I said, I think I got in. And they go, oh yeah, I think so too.
That's classic. That's absolutely classic that you had to, you might, you knew it, you probably knew it was coming, but then when it finally did, it still didn't register for a
No,
couple of
it
moments.
didn't.
It's hilarious here in Germany because the term for, unfortunately not is leider nicht. And, in Australia, I think I experienced less rejection in Australia because obviously, I'm a, I was born and raised in Australia and so on, but kind of as a foreigner in Germany, trying to do kind of tricky things with kind of not a lot of German initially and stuff. I always say I reckon I've received 1,000 emails that start with "leider nicht," with this "unfortunately not," and like
Uh-huh.
you, I got to a point where like I'm just like it's another "leider nicht," like here comes and then in recent times there's been less of the "leider nicht" starting the email, which has been kind of spins you out like you're
Mm-hmm.
describing. But I guess my point is I started to embrace the "leider nicht" and saw that I actually did see the kind of funny side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and this sounds, it's not like laughing it off. It's like again pulling the kind of self-critique, as you said, not taking it personally. And that's a
Yeah.
massive one when it comes to rejection, is this is not necessarily a personal attack. This is
Yes.
a decision that might have multiple variables and it may be completely out of your hands. So why are you going to put your entire value or worth on decisions like that? If you do, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to just be stress provoking. But yeah, very so awesome that you persisted and used it as food, which then became the thing. It was like a self-fulfilling exercise.
It was, and and the other thing that I did was I let go of, thinking, okay, I I have to get on a TEDx, because if I don't get on a TEDx, I'm not going to be um, complete, let's say. And so when you let go, you don't stress about it. Then it'll work itself out. It really will. And it's interesting too. Um, I also learned when I would get these rejections. As I said, I've laughed it off, but I also have a reminder note next to my computer, and it says, "I'm not pizza. I'm not going to be liked by everyone." And and that's the reality, is that when we realize that we're getting rejected, but it may not be about us. But if it is about us, so what? We're not going to be liked by everyone. So don't try to be liked by everyone, because it's futile. It really is. And I learned that from when I first was teaching college classes. And I remember, I'd have, let's say, a 40 student class. And at the end, the last day of class, they would fill out, their evaluations on the class. And then I would get that after grades were submitted. And I remember I would look at the evaluations, and I'm not kidding you, 39 of 40 would say this was the best class I've ever had. And I had international students, so I made it fun for them because it was a marketing class, and I would actually do gamification, and they really enjoyed that. But there was always going to be somebody who said, I didn't like the class for whatever reason. And what would I do at the, initially I would look and go, oh, where did I fail? Instead of looking at 39 of 40
Mm.
that really enjoyed the class, I'm looking at one person who I didn't connect with for whatever reason. And it's like, why do we do that to ourselves? That inner critic, that we just, look at the negative instead of looking at the positive. And if we can get that mindset shift to say, look at the good that you're doing. Look at how many, so you could think of it as, when you're at work, and let's say you had a review with your supervisor, and the supervisor says, yeah, you did all these great things. Well, there's this one thing you need to work on. Don't focus on the one thing you need to work on. Sure, you want to address it, but don't just give all of your attention to that, because you're focusing on the negative. And the reality is, if we continuously focus on the positive, what we're doing is we'll attract back like energy like that. So
Mm.
if you want to surround yourself with others who are positive, then you're going to have positive conversations in most cases, or just positive interactions. If you really are focused on the negative, notice the kind of people that you're going to attract back that are attracted to that negative energy. It really works.
Yeah, we mirror, often mirror things. Um, it's also prevalent in today's society with the world of kind of keyboard warriors and comments, because you'll see
Yeah.
like 100 positive, or and then you get one because somebody's just fired off their keyboard, and it can just kind of can have the ability to derail your, exactly like you say, you haven't focused on the 99 positive ones. For some reasons, our brains go to that negative one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, it's like a muscle that needs to be it's an exercise in getting good at focusing on the
Right.
positive stuff, I think.
And those online, yeah, I like to refer to them as trolls.
Mm.
There are people out there who they just have to be negative to others. And I remember on LinkedIn, for example, there was this person based in England. And I remember he reached out to me connect, and I connected. And every person that reaches out to connect with me on LinkedIn, I send a personal message back. I do a quick look at their profile, and I send a message back, and not a AI autoresponder. And this guy comes back and he makes some sort of really negative comment about what I said, and that I forget what it was the first time. So I just said, okay, fine. I'm not going to. I disconnected from being a connection of his. And then roughly a month, maybe 6 weeks later, he reaches out and connects with me again. And I remember looking at his picture and going, why does this guy look familiar to me? Because I had let go of that negative encounter. And I was thinking to myself, and I'm looking at going, I know this guy from somewhere. I couldn't remember specifically. And so I connect and I send him another message. And now he's even more negative. And he comes back and I remember in particular, one thing that he said is that you weak Americans, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And I'm going, okay. So I didn't even respond to him this time. But what I did was I took a snapshot of his profile before I disconnected and blocked him. And I sent it to, I have a large network of friends on LinkedIn. And I said, has anyone else experienced this guy? And I got so many responses,
Oh,
and
gosh.
oh yes, stay away from this guy. And the consistent term that my network was saying is, this guy is a turd.
Right. Wow.
He really is. He
He's
just all he wants to do is he just wants to be negative and flame fires for people.
That's
And
crazy.
it
Really
is.
crazy.
And so there's going to be people like that out there.
Mm.
And one person, or actually two, of my network said, congratulations. When you get a troll like this commenting to you, you know that you are doing good things because you're getting out there, it's getting distributed, and you can't help but find these
Mm.
negative people.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of, there's no avoiding it really. If,
Mm-mm.
if, if, if you're, like you say, not trying to please everyone, and kind of throwing down in, yeah, for sure. Um, you've also done improv
Mhm.
comedy.
I do. I
I
do.
uh I did a class here once, and
Oh,
I loved it because it was like pure, like fearless. It was just like kind of sink or swim in the moment. And it, I understand, the philosophy around improv is kind of the yes and I love the fearless nature of it, and the kind of the supportive communities you get in improv to allow each other to fall flat on the face, and in a really safe and encouraging way, which is very different to what we were just talking about negativity.
Right.
So improv has been something that has helped you with that kind of laughter as a counter kind of approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. The so my TEDx talk was one of only two presentations I ever did in my career. I did several hundred, where I had to say the speech word for word. I had to have every word memorized. That was enormously hard for me. With improv, it's just the opposite. You are basically waiting for whatever the audience suggests, your cast member says, and you respond to that. Now, yes, you have to be quick. That is a challenge. But what I absolutely love about improv is that when you make a mistake, that usually is more funny for the audience than
Mm.
if it goes perfectly. Because I think audience members, when they see it go perfectly, they think like, oh, that must have been staged or practiced. But when you completely fail on something that you say or something that you do, like, for example, there'll be times where I'll be on stage and, I'll say something that when I said it, I thought it was really funny, and it's quiet and crickets. And I'm thinking, okay, that bombed. And then there's other times where people find it hilarious, especially if I, make a comment like, okay, maybe it wasn't so funny or something. Then people laugh
Mm.
hilariously. And so when you realize that even if you make a mistake, the audience is going to enjoy it.
It's
And
so,
so it takes the handcuffs off of you.
yeah, you get out of your own way.
Right.
There's so much in that, because it's, yeah, why is it as humans we like, if it is too slick and perfect, that's not what we're looking for. We're all flawed, and we're all, I think we're looking for the relatable in each other. And when you see someone showing that they're as messy as all of us, or whatever it may be, it can connect in a, but naturally we want to go for the kind of perfect performance, or whatever it may be. But the improv just encourages to just rip that band-aid off. And
Exactly. And and it's so funny too, because going back to the I'm not pizza, the if something I say isn't funny, it's like, okay, let it go. Don't
Mm,
just, oh, if only I would have said this instead of that.
mhm.
Oh, no, you just have to, you just have to let it go. And what I find so fun also about improv is the only thing that our troupe does is that's prepared is we know what skits or games we're going to do.
Mhm.
But because the game is based on whatever feedback we get from the audience, literally we could have the exact same lineup of skits and have two different shows, and they will be completely opposite, assuming that the audiences are different, because we will get different suggestions and we will go in completely different directions on each show. There's times where, I am absolutely floored at how great the show went when literally, we had no idea before we went on stage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of public bombing moments playing in bands. That kind of gave me a thick skin,
Mhm.
when things went wrong on stage. But it
Yep.
was kind of cool, because you never knew what was going to happen on a night, and it was never what you expected. But dealing with those things in the moment were a lot of growth. A lot of growth.
Exactly. Well, and there's things like that come out where you think, oh, wow, I shouldn't have said that. You learn from it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's funny if you see our troupe, we're usually spying to see the audience, just kind of get a quick look at the audience. And usually if there's small kids in the audience, it's kind of like, okay, we have a little bit, make sure we don't do this, we don't say that,
Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, it's amazing how the audience gets really into it because they're providing the where the direction of the show
Mm.
is going to go. And one of our favorite activities we do is called Lines from a Hat. And what happens is during, so we do a one set, and then we have a break and then a second set. And during the break, we ask audience members to write a sentence, a saying, something from either a song, a movie, whatever. And when we go up on stage with this Lines from a Hat, we ask them, okay, what is the relationship between these two people? And they might say, oh, husband and wife in divorce court, let's say. Okay, so we go ahead and we start doing that interaction, and then we'll say something like, well, this reminds, you know what my mom used to say about you. And then at that point we open the slip of paper that an audience member wrote. We haven't seen it before that. And it could be something like, you can't handle the truth, or something like that. And audience members are waiting because they want to hear their line. And what is crazy about this activity is inevitably we will have at least one line per show, which was perfect
Mm.
for the setup. Absolutely perfect. We couldn't have written it
Wow, he
any
couldn't have written
better.
it. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's yeah, that's really cool.
So
I
it's and it just is so much fun to that the audience participation is it makes the show. It really is.
On the laughter thing, I actually play a laughing game with my son. He's 11, and it's
Hmm.
very simple. It's just you got to make the other one laugh. And
Hmm.
it's like we said earlier, whenever we go for the laugh, it doesn't work. But when
Right.
we it's the kind of spontaneous or random moments that get the laugh. When we go for the laugh, yeah, it's a great game to play with him in terms of just being present and like quality time.
Yep. I
Uh,
did the same thing with my son too. It's real
cool.
actually with my daughter as well. Our favorite one was did you ever try this one? Don't laugh.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a great one because
yeah,
you tell somebody don't laugh, beef. And there you're doing it right there.
yeah, yeah. And then just
There's just something, it's human nature. We want to laugh.
yeah,
You're being
yeah,
told not to laugh.
yeah. Yep, for sure, for sure. That's that's a classic. Uh, it's a tradition on the show to have guests offer some kind of challenge to listeners. Now, we've covered quite a bit of territory because we've touched on a lot of things, including um, core values, some of those things you offered as a counter to stress. We've talked about rejection. Um, is there anything that springs to mind that somebody could try on a daily basis? I mean, we've covered a lot already, but is there anything else? Just a little challenge.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. One of the things that I found when I was looking at ways to reduce my stress, um, for those that are type A personalities like I am, a lot of times we don't have time to spend. I remember looking at books that on deep breathing or yoga or meditation, and it was like a 300-page book on one activity. The reality is when we're stressed, we probably only have just a couple of minutes to uh, do something about it. And one of my favorite, and I kind of touched upon that here when we were talking about anxiety, about visualization. But what I would say is I'll just walk you through a visualization exercise that the audience members can try and see if this is something that works for you. Uh, if you're listening to this while you're driving a vehicle, please press pause and pick it back up after you're not driving a vehicle because you're going to close your eyes. So go ahead and close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And I want you to go in your mind to a place you like to relax. Call it your happy place. Maybe it's the beach, maybe it's a park, Maybe it's a lake. Maybe it's your backyard. Maybe it's the spa. Maybe it's your favorite chair in your home. Wherever it is, go there now and take in all of your senses. So, what do you feel? Do you feel the sun on your face? Maybe the sand or the grass under your feet? And what do you smell? Do you smell the fresh air? Maybe the lotion from the spa? Maybe you made popcorn for your favorite movie. And what do you hear? Do you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Maybe the water splashing on shore? And what do you see? Do you see the blue sky? Maybe the green of the trees or the grass? Whatever it is, take it all in and take another deep breath in and open your eyes. Simple visualization you can do at any point, takes 1 minute, again, as long as you're not driving a vehicle. And it just can help calm you so that you can take a moment, be present with yourself. And the reason that you imagine your senses is because when you imagine your senses being incorporated into wherever you go in your mind, then your body automatically relaxes. So I don't know how that was for you,
Yeah,
Daniel.
it's great. It takes you right there. Uh, Mine's a bit different because a place I relax is in the sauna here, but actually
Mm.
sometimes that can be very hot.
Mhm. But if it's your
No, but
kind of
it
place,
is,
then
it is. So no, but bringing those senses in takes you there, and I know that it's a place of relaxation, and the body responds to
Mhm,
that. So yeah,
mhm.
I can feel it straight away. So it's very cool.
Yeah, it's something to just give a try, and like I said, it's wonderful to do something just 1 minute. It really is. And people do it at their desks. They can, just I was told by some people that they do it all sitting on the toilet.
Yeah. Well, it's anytime you can grab that time, like
Mhm.
I've been quite big lately on sort of maximizing just time, like, whether
Yes.
it be in the car or just trying to make that time as effective. So if you use the time to do that exercise, it can only benefit you if
Yeah.
at
It
any moment. So no, that's a really good one. Where can people find you and the book?
So just go to my website, petealexander.com, PeteAlexander.com. It's got the link to the TEDx talk, the book, my videos. Like, I'll go ahead and give you the link to the personal values activity that people can try. So that's the best place. And they can also connect with me on social media.
It's fantastic that you've taken what you've been through and turned it around, and now you're offering people really like practical strategies for stress relief. So all credit to you for
Mm.
doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, I'm the person that's a typical worker. I know that therapists and psychologists and stuff work with this all the time, but I'm just talking about what happened to me,
Mm.
and so I just, I figured it happened for a reason, and if I can help, one person at a time help reduce their stress so they can avoid a chronic disease, then I'm doing my, making a difference in the way that I want to do in my life.
Yeah, for cool. I mean, it's coming from lived experience, so
Mhm.
it's got a lot of weight to it. I really appreciate your time, Pete. It's been awesome.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for having me on your wonderful show, and I really appreciate your listeners' time as well.
There you go, guys. Honest ratings for the show on Apple are appreciated. If you have a guest suggestion, please feel free to reach out on my website at danielthomas.co. I'm also on social media at Mr. Dan Thomas. Catch you on the next episode.